Hey, welcome everybody. If we haven't met, my name is Eric Cave. I'm the Director of Next Gen Ministries for the Pacific Northwest Conference, and you are hopefully here for the adult leader training for Thunder and Mud. So welcome. We're really glad that you're here. This training is a result of our youth commission. We had a meeting earlier this year, and we were talking about how we can try to increase the safety for our retreats for our students and the quality of our leadership that's at the event. And we came up with this idea that we would require background checks for all leaders, and that each leader would go through a training. And this is our training. This is how we prepared in order to accomplish that. So what you can look forward to is about an hour-long time where we're going to be going through a series of important topics for you as a leader at Mud and Thunder. There will be a handout that will be pasted in the chat. I think Christy already did, but hopefully you can go back and see it. If not, we'll probably maybe post it a couple more times as we go along. It'll also be emailed to you following this so that you can follow along. The recording will be essential for anybody that wasn't able to watch this, but also you can go back and rewatch it if you'd like to. And I want to be clear that the training document that we prepared and that's in the chat, we're not going to read every word of it today. We don't have time for that. It would take way too long. And so instead, we're going to kind of fly over it. We're going to reference it. And the expectation is that you do read it every word before coming to Thunder and or Mud. So what we believe is that that we're going to, in order to have the best quality events, that'll come from having the best quality of leaders there. And so our attempt here is to all come together as fellow learners and hopefully grow so that this event can be as safe and as fun and as quality as possible for all the students that will be there. So if you turn to the planning document, if you pull it up on your browser or follow along on your phone or however you like, you can see here. We're going to start with the introduction. I want to talk a little bit about the heart of great leadership. And here we're talking about the fact that when we come into a ministry context, leadership starts with our hearts. Great skills are important. Understanding and knowledge are going to be really helpful, but it's where our hearts are that'll be able to empower us to be able to make the biggest impact. So there's 5 key pieces to that, and I'm going to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint or slides we'll go through in order to highlight some of these things as we go along. So we've done our welcome. Here we have the slide for the heart of great leadership. So there's 5 things. The first one is that we need to lead like Jesus. So this part of our heart is where we do our best to emulate and model Jesus's form of leadership. And as we know, that Jesus came to serve and not to be served. And so humility is really the key for this point. And we want to encourage you as you come into an environment with one of our events and you're leading students to do so with a heart of posture of curiosity instead of defensiveness. To be like Jesus, embody him as much as you can. The other is to lead proactively. And so that's when you walk into a situation, you don't sit back and expect others to be the one to take the first step, but instead you ask yourself, what needs to be done? And then you do it. Please don't hesitate to ask staff for supplies or support for getting the job done. Another key element of having a heart of great leadership is to lead flexibly. So we understand that situations change. We're going to do our best as we go into these events to have a really tight and a useful and effective schedule and plans, but be ready for those to change at any time. And as you do so, embrace an optimistic outlook, which leads to the 5th or the 4th point of having a great heart of leadership, which is to lead encouragingly. And I like this phrase that I learned from a friend of mine named Ben Kearns a long time ago at an event called Chick. And that's we need to be shock absorbers for our students. If something doesn't go their way at the retreat or at an event, your job is to help them by absorbing their frustration and helping them to process it. It's not your job to vent and share your frustration with the student. Instead, find an event leader or another adult to confide in in order to find your own shock absorber. Your job is to help encourage students, especially in challenging or surprising circumstances. And then the last is to lead authentically. You don't have to be perfect, but we want you to model with students what it looks like to be navigating our shortcomings and growing in a Christ-like manner. And so those 5 things, I think if we start there, you'll have made it a long ways on being able to be a leader that's in a great position in order for God to use you to have a big impact on the students that we'll be working with. So we're going to kind of cover 3 big parts, big sections tonight. And the first one is essential skills for youth events. And I think these are going to be really helpful for any leader in any environment, even outside of our events. And so I hope that you find this really helpful. I'm going to pass it on to my friend Jonathan, and he's going to lead us into that section.
Thanks, Eric. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan. If I haven't met you yet, I'm the Director of Student Ministries at Harbor Covenant Church. And yeah, excited to be going to Mud and Thunder. Love these weekend retreats. So let me go over just some essential skills. The first thing that we think is really important is for us as leaders being able to manage the group flow and the schedules. So every leader, when you guys show up, you're going to be given a calendar, or not a calendar, just a schedule of the weekend. And we'd really encourage you to look over it, know what's coming up throughout the weekend. As best you can, keep it not only on you, but just easily accessible. Students love to know what's coming up. They love to always ask what's next, sometimes way too often in my experience. And so being able to answer those questions and just share with them what's coming up is just going to help ease some of their tension, especially for some of the newer students who are going to be here for the first time. We also really want to encourage you is make an intentional plan during free time. So we have like 4 to 5 hours of free time during Mud and Thunder. And this is a time that can feel pretty overwhelming for a lot of leaders of like, what do I do with this much time? And so we'd encourage you, make a mental plan. One of the, even on the document, if you want to look through it, it kind of gives you a breakdown of what a plan could look like. You could spend hour 1 just connecting with some of your outgoing students. Hour 2, you're going to find your quieter students and check in with them. Hour 3, you're going to go join an activity that one of your groups is doing. And then hour 4, circle back to anybody you might have missed. So just having that intentional plan as you're kind of going throughout that free time. Third thing we'd say is participate in activities. I always tell my leaders that you don't have to do anything that you don't want to do, but I expect you to be there while students are doing it. So if there are students doing the rock wall, just go cheer them on, encourage them as they're doing it, especially if they're afraid of heights, if this is a big new thing for them. Just being there on the sidelines makes a huge difference. And then the last thing is, as you guys are, a lot of you are coming here on a team, just debrief daily with your other leaders. If there's a conversation that you had with a student and you're like, man, I think they're starting to really like break through with Jesus, let the other leaders know, let them invite them in and pray in, or if they see them later throughout the day, they can follow up and have those conversations as well. So don't carry the weight of, I got to do everything with every student during free time. But how can you incorporate your leaders to be able to carry all of this weight together during that time? And then I'll hand it off to Tim. He'll kind of share a little bit more.
Yeah, I just want to say that Jonathan really means it when he says you don't have to do everything, right? So there's been a lot of crazy games where I've been running around and getting my pants all torn up and dirty and stuff. And I'm like, Jonathan, what are you doing? And he's like, hey, man, I'm here. I'm not jumping down on that game. But I think
I know my strengths, man.
No, I actually, it's kind of Jonathan demonstrates like the actual heart of kind of what we're trying to do as leaders at these retreats and at these events. So the retreat and the event is not as much about our experience as it is about students' experience, right? So really, as a leader, you're focused on how are your students doing? How are the kids doing? I've got an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, and we sent our kids away, or our older daughter away, to camp for the first time this summer. And I will say that I felt very confident in the leadership of the staff at camp to really take care of them for the weekend. And that's what parents are doing with you. And whether you're the youth pastor or you're just a volunteer, and not just, I should say, whether you're the youth pastor, youth worker, or the volunteer, parents are entrusting their kids to you for the weekend. And so it's the kids' experience that's the most important. So you don't have to be the superstar in the big game, because the kids are the superstars in the big game, right? But your students are going to have various experiences at camp. They're going to be bringing a lot with them. Whatever's been going on that week or that day, whatever's going on with their friends and all those things. So the key word in the whole thing is just being a shepherd, right? So the approach is having shepherding hearts. So first off, like, there's going to be some health concerns. Right. So you just want to be aware of how your kids are doing. And I would encourage you to take a look at the training manual to make sure that you're kind of like being aware, so that you're aware of how your kids are doing health wise, whether that's exhaustion or dehydration or whatever, or they just need time to rest, or maybe you have a first aid kit, or where there's one ready in case of cuts or scrapes, those kinds of things. Just pay attention to how your kids are doing health wise. And then we'd also encourage you to be aware of what's going on socially too, right? So we'd encourage you to kind of just practice the ministry of presence over the weekend. You don't have to be a kid's best friend, but being available, being there to share experiences, and to just kind of have a sense of overall what's going on, like in your group dynamics and that kind of thing. You can be a bridge for a lot of kids. And then also, like, when kids are seeming withdrawn or overwhelmed or struggling, know when to listen, know when to encourage, and when to refer to like senior leadership, right? So have conversations. You are the shepherd of the kids that you're bringing, and you're just there to try to ensure that they have a good weekend, and work with your team to do that well, so that kids have the most positive experience that they can. So yeah, Christy, go ahead.
Thanks, Tim. One of the pastoral roles that you'll be stepping into within the leadership space will be leading group discussions. Throughout the week after our speaking sessions, there will be an opportunity for small groups to gather together and unpack what are students hearing, what is the Spirit doing in their heart as they're listening, and what are maybe next steps for them going forward. So that's a very rich and important time. If you are the lead youth leader, we would encourage you to start thinking now about how you want to divide your group. If you have a smaller group, you might all meet together. If you have a larger group, you're probably going to want to divide up into smaller sections so that everybody will have the opportunity to be heard in the group discussion time. So whatever your role is, you're going to be participating in the small groups on some level. And to lead that well, we have a few key tips for you. The first one is that it's really helpful to review the questions in advance. And of course, that only works if we give you the questions in advance. But I believe we are planning to do that for Thunder. So you should get those in advance and make sure that you have the chance to read through them so that you understand where the discussion is moving toward. Be aware of what your students' maturity level is. Some groups are ready to dig a lot deeper. Some groups maybe on some sessions are going to hit a lot more surfacey. And make sure you're following the Spirit's leading as you go. What your group needs may not be the same in-depth theological discussion that the group next to you needs. So it's okay if what your group needs is time to be silly and connect, although we do ask you to be considerate of the groups around you. One idea, if kids have been sitting for a long time and then you're moving into a group discussion time, is to try like a quick energizer, like, doing jumping jacks really quickly, having people stand up and stretch, something to kind of make their body reset so that their minds are ready to reset as well. And then as you are leading group discussion, be thinking about how much you are sharing as a leader. The goal would be to aim for like a 70-30% rule. You want students to be talking 70% of the time and you 30% or less. And so you're trying to facilitate, not trying to preach during that time. And that means that you don't have to be the expert, which hopefully gives you some freedom and some grace to know you don't have to have the answer to every question. You don't have to be the one who is speaking the answer to everything that comes up or correcting everything that comes up. So just be aware of what's going on. And maybe if somebody is saying something really off base, you can be like, oh, that's an interesting thought. Like, what do the rest of you think? And, call on a student with good theology or something so they can correct them. We suggest that when you're doing group discussions, you sit in a circle so everybody can see each other. Have people sit up, not lay down. Laying down does not communicate you are listening, even if you promise you are listening. You can, depending on your group dynamic, you might want to do popcorn answers where kids take turns, just based on when they have something to say. Or if you have a group that's maybe a little bit more reluctant to share, you can just go around the circle and have everyone share as they go around. If you have a group that's talking over each other a lot and maybe oversharing, you can use like a talking stick or another object to remind students to listen to whoever's turn it is as they are sharing. One aspect to facilitating good small group time is to make sure you're asking good questions that are open-ended instead of closed-ended. And one thing I've learned is that when you ask students a why question, they're more likely to be like, I don't know, because they feel like you're looking for the right answer and they're not sure if they have it. But if you can change that to a what question, like what are some of the reasons why people might, that gives them the space to brainstorm and not just have to have one right answer. If you have somebody who's oversharing constantly, techniques to try and elicit responses from other people are just simply like, I'd love to hear from someone who hasn't shared yet. And usually the person who's oversharing will get the message, and hopefully somebody new will pop in. And one thing I love to do if I have a student who is very off task is I like to hand the questions to them and ask them to move us through the questions throughout the session. And I find that often that wiggly or most distracting student, when given a little bit of responsibility, can really step up to that and try and help keep others on task, which in turn helps keep them on task. So. And then lastly, keep in mind that you're going to need some reset activities. There's a few examples and ideas of those in the manual, so I won't go through them. But when kids are getting squirrely, forcing them to sit there and trying to make them have a serious conversation is going to be less beneficial than just recognizing where they're at and trying to circle back around to that later on. So hopefully that is helpful for you in navigating small group times. Eric.
At Thunder and Mud, you will be in cabins and rooms with your students. In the manual and on the screen are a few points that are being really helpful for you to manage that. I just want to highlight one of them, and that is to establish clear and reasonable expectations early. I was a middle school teacher when I was young, believe it or not, and I learned something great from my principal, and they taught me that at the beginning of the year, it's easier to start with good and solid boundaries and then relax them if you need to, than it is to start without boundaries and then try to enforce them after you've lost control of your classroom. I think the same is true with your cabin. On that first night, establish clear, reasonable expectations and stick to them. and your students will probably have a stronger reaction than if you don't set those and on the second night are having trouble trying to rein them in because you didn't set those well. So be sure to check out the other tips as well, and I'm going to pass it on. I think next is Jonathan to talk about navigating those particularly difficult students.
Yes. Love talking about difficult students. We all have one coming to mind right now, which is super exciting for camp time. But I think this is super important. And one of the things that I always tell my leaders when we go to camps and stuff like this is that we're leaders, not friends. When students are acting up, a friend joins along in and makes jokes and goes with it. A leader addresses it. And kind of puts it to an end. And so we want to be leaders. And so during this time, if students are acting up, we really want to address their behavior, not character. We don't want to say, hey, you are disrespectful. We want to say, hey, that choice was disrespectful. We want to be mindful of our own maybe feelings or temperament. We don't want to harm students in any way, either physically or verbally. We always, when disciplining, we want to strive for redemption. So we want to make sure that this is an opportunity where we can point them back to Jesus, and they can see this as like a moment of discipleship rather than a moment of discipline. And then also just know your limits. Know what you're able to handle and what you're not. If there's another leader who's better suited to handle a certain incident, ask them for help. If this is something maybe for the youth pastor to take on, hand it off to them. But just be aware of kind of knowing your own limits. Be mindful of just anything that's escalating, no concerning patterns. If this is pretty normal behavior for that student, then you're like, okay, this is something we can deal with. If it's escalating, if it's out of the normal, bring the team in, just kind of let them know what's going on. And then if anything serious happens, we always encourage document serious incidents. Just being able to write it down. This is great tool to send back to the youth pastor. It's great tool to send back to the senior pastor. It's great tool to send to parents that, hey, this thing happened. We wrote it down. We have it documented, and we can have those kind of follow-up conversations later. So it just sets you up for the most success, especially when engaging with parents and with leadership. So those are some things to be mindful about navigating some more difficult students, and I will pass it back on to Tim.
Yeah, so these are mountaintop experiences that kids and adults and youth groups as a whole oftentimes have. And so not all moments are mountaintop experiences, right? So as you think about beyond like the retreat, we'd encourage you to kind of think about how meaningful that time and kind of just the ordinary, like week to week, like day-to-day life that kids have, right? A lot of great youth ministry happens during these ordinary times after extraordinary weekends. So before the event, we'd encourage you to just think about, personally, what expectations do you have, and what are you hoping that God will do through your time together at Thunder or at Mud? We'd encourage you to, before departing, just help students identify and start thinking about their next steps. So, hey, after this weekend, what do you hope to do? Like, what steps do you want to take when you get home? How can we support you in that? Who do you want to tell about your experience? And then kind of just like some sustainable follow-up. So planning a follow-up contact within the first week or two after the retreat, helping students identify accountability partners from the weekend. Maybe it's a friend or a leader a relationship that they developed that was like special to them from the weekend. Connecting retreat themes to upcoming church programming. And then just creating opportunities for students to serve or lead based on that retreat experience. This kind of takes the retreat experience and it puts it in context in your own youth ministry back at home. And then there's just some practical tools you can take a look at, but maybe it's giving students a simple journal or a note card to record their commitments or their experiences, taking pictures and having like kind of like your own like reel from the weekend. Like we'll have one like as a conference, like we'll have those. But yeah, so there's a lot of different things you can do. But we'd encourage you to think through how can you help kids solidify their takeaway from the weekend. So I'm going to pass it over to Christy.
Thanks, Tim. So part 2 of our training is going to be addressing minor safety, and that is not minor like opposed to major, but minor as in young people, 18 and under, or not under 18. And that's the goal that we have, is that we want to create a physically, emotionally, and spiritually safe environment, because we think that in that context is where students best connect with God and others and experience growth. So to create that safe environment, we have some basic guidelines that adult leaders need to meet, including their age, their maturity, their faith in Christ. They must have passed a recent background check within the last 3 years, and we're having this training. So we ask that you please abide by all of our safety guidelines that we're about ready to go over at the event. So number 1 is that we want you to make sure that you're upholding physical safety and health as priorities. So don't let students come if they are sick. I know that they're going to be really bummed and it's sad, but we don't want to spread it around to everyone, and you don't want to spend your time nursing them. If a student at the event gets injured, you are going to want to seek assistance from the nurse or from other event leaders. I almost always try and house the nurse in Lakeside 1 so that she's easy to be found. And in the case of a severe injury, though, your first response would be to call 911 and make sure that help is coming on the way and will be directed to the right part of camp. But we will have things like ice packs and Band-Aids and stuff like that. And if you're a super leader like Jonathan, you'll carry around your own little mini first aid kit. And then lastly, please, as leaders, do not allow or encourage students to engage in unsafe behavior. I will refer here to the Eric Cave rule of not allowing students or adults to ride on the outside of vehicles, for instance, around camp. But just keep in mind, you are in charge of your own students, but if you see somebody else's students engaging in unsafe or disrespectful behavior, you have the authority to intervene. It's on all of us to keep all of our kids safe. Next, to keep kids safe, we need to make sure that we are maintaining appropriate boundaries. And so my friends here are going to go through some of the boundaries we're going to hold.
Okay, so let's talk for a moment about physical boundaries. This is maintaining a really healthy boundary around our space around us, and especially with how we're interacting with students. So where we say here, we want to make sure and avoid having adults alone together with a single student in a private location, and especially in housing. And we say should never, and we use the word avoid because we understand that there sometimes it's impossible. In the leader guide, we kind of give you some instructions, like what do you do if you're in a room or a student walks in, to give you some tips around that. But please do your best to not be in that position. Secondly, ensure that your physical contact is appropriate and limited. And this is a tough one, especially if you're a hugger like I am, to really embrace the art of the side hug and being really, really careful to limit it as much as you can. In our circumstances, will we allow a leader and a student to share a bed? Sometimes we have in the larger cabins, 2 people to the queen bed. And if that's the case, make sure it's students or leaders that are sharing that. And never ever be nude in front of your students. That should probably be a no-brainer, but that means take your clothes into the bathroom stall with you to change so that you don't accidentally find yourself in that situation. And we're next going to go on to relational boundaries. Jonathan, take it away.
Yeah. Again, this is where the mindset we're leaders, not friends, comes into play again. So our role as leader is to supervise and to shepherd students. So we just want to be aware that what we're providing and what we're sharing is appropriate. This isn't a time for us to share and process through our own frustrations or pain or anything kind of going on in our personal lives. This is an opportunity where we get to really help students focus on Jesus. We want to make that the priority. We want to serve as a model in our speech and our actions. And so again, when we're engaging well in worship, we're kind of giving students permission to as well. But even when we're not, and we're kind of looking around or zoning off or not engaging, we give students permission to do that as well, to not really care about what's going on. So we just want to make sure that we're setting the model that we want to be setting. Also want to be really careful. Not even careful. We're just going to say it straight out. You can't have romantic relationships. Flirting between students and leaders. This is one of those things. Again, it should be a no-brainer. But we just want to be very clear from a denomination side or a conference side. This is just something that won't be tolerated. And then as well, just consider your role, your words, and your tone. We get an opportunity to speak life into students, and we're going to be tired, and we're going to be frustrated, and we're going to be overwhelmed at some points. But we really want to be considerate of what we're saying and how we're saying it, so we can give students the best chance to really know Jesus. And so, and I'll pass it back on to Tim.
So we just want to encourage you to maintain healthy emotional boundaries to protect students from emotional harm and confusion. So first off, just want to avoid treating students as peers or friends. So don't use students as sounding boards for processing your own life experiences or whatever drama you have going on in your life. And it's okay for you to have a real life and to have real things going on, but the students are not there to serve as guides for you in that conversation as much as you are the shepherd, right? You are the one who is leading students through this weekend. So that does mean that it's okay for you if you have your own thing going on, if you need time or space or prayer or encouragement, arrange like backup care for your students and seek out other adults to help provide the care that you need. So identify appropriate support personnel at the retreat. That's the planning team staff, that's us and others who are there as a part of the conference staff. We've got youth commission leaders there. There's others that can, even people within your own team, like have those conversations with adults. You don't need to have those conversations with kids. And again, we encourage you to share authentically, but to use discernment in sharing those things that will be helpful for your students to see or to hear. And I would just say use like err on the side of sharing less, right? You don't need to go into detail about challenging periods of your life because again, you're trying to hear more from students and trying to share less of your own experiences, right? Like for the most part, you want to hear from your kids the whole time and be a good sounding board for them. And then just protecting students from their own over disclosure, right? So publicly sharing details of their personal trauma, maybe their history, it can be regretted later or may negatively impact other students in the room. So if need be, ask the student to share in more general terms in the moment, but offer to listen to their story in depth at a different time. Just be a good shepherd. Christy.
Thanks, Tim. We want to protect students from spiritual harm and abuse by setting some spiritual boundaries. We're excited to see what God is doing, but sometimes our enthusiasm can put unexpected or unintended pressure on students, which is not great. So make sure you're ready to meet students where they are. Trust that the Holy Spirit will do the Spirit's work and God's timing. Please do not pressure students to make professions or commitments for which they are not ready. I'm sure we all have stories of kids who prayed a prayer at some point because they wanted to make whoever was talking to them happy, but did not experience life change. Don't condemn students' beliefs that do not align with orthodoxy. So lean into curiosity, ask them why they believe that, maybe offer to do a study with them or something. Avoid being the answer and solution person. Instead, invite them to seek answers and solutions from God, from God's word, and again, offer to be a guide along that process. We want to, as much as possible, avoid spiritual manipulation, which can happen easily when students are tired and there's a lot of energy in the room and the music is swelling. So whenever a student has some sort of a spiritual experience, make sure that afterwards you're following up with them and asking them, what did that mean to you? And how are you feeling about it now? Rather than making an assumption about what was happening. And then lastly, because we want to respect students' spiritual and physical autonomy, please always ask permission before you pray out loud for a student, and also ask permission before laying hands on any other person to pray for them. And that is the end of our boundaries section.
Thank you, Christy. All right, I'm going to move into the next part or next section, which is reporting instances of suspected, disclosed, or observed abuse. And this is going to be a little bit maybe longer and more technical section, so please bear with me. The first thing that we need to clearly state, should probably have on the slide, is that it is our policy that all adults working with minors have the duty to report known or suspected child abuse. So we see us all as mandatory reporters, whether the state would say you are or not. And so keep that in mind as we go through this. This is for all of us. So the first question is, what is child abuse? Child abuse includes sexual abuse and sexual exploitation, injury that causes harm to a child's health, welfare, or safety, or neglect or maltreatment of a child by a person responsible for providing care. And the question that I run into over and over again with youth ministry leaders is this: what if I'm not certain? Nobody wants to make the mistake of like making a false accusation and causing problems within a family or something like that. But I would go back to the age-old adage that says it's better to be safe than sorry when it comes to this question. And if you think that you have some suspicion that there will be child abuse, I would say follow up on it. I will have instructions on how to do that on your own outside of our retreat events, but also especially how to do it at our retreats, because you don't want to hesitate and then let a student go on being abused. Instead, we want to make sure they can take advantage of every opportunity to protect the students that we are working with. Okay, so this is the next question. How might I discover or come to suspect abuse? So there's a lot of different ways that abuse might be discerned or disclosed. By far, the most common thing is a student will, in a moment of confidence, share with you that they have been abused. But there are other ways that we want to be paying attention to as well. So why are we watching for warning signs of grooming or inappropriate behavior in adults, other adults that are around our students? That might be, if you're at home in that environment, paying attention to the adults that are around them. At camp, we're actually talking about watching out for each other and the other leaders. And the kind of the key, there are several in the document there, warning signs to be paying attention to, but that showing excessive or inappropriate physical affection is always a big red flag for me that I don't want to ignore. For one thing, it violates our policy ahead that we talked about earlier about showing physical affection, especially to people of the opposite sex. And so we want to be, that's a red flag that you want to definitely talk to someone about. Talk to one of us if you see that happening with somebody else. There's also student indicators of possible abuse. There's a lot of different ways. It's not very clear. It really comes out of having a good relationship with the student to be able to see, okay, something's going on here. In my experience, one of the main things is we need to know sudden changes in behavior. It might be the way they dress or their academics or their interests or something like that. So this might be something that would be seen in the very narrow context of our retreats, but really here, you'll notice this over having a relationship with a student over time. So if you witness outright abuse, then we want you to act on it immediately. Intervene immediately, separate a victim from an offender, always concentrate on the safety and how the victim is doing more than the offender. We can deal with the offender later. We want to make sure that the victim is safe. And then I would say immediately loop in a supervisor. So if this is in your home context, talk to your youth leader, whoever it is, if you're a volunteer. And then that youth leader, the person that's in charge of ministry, I would definitely quickly loop in your pastor or your board, those people that are there to support you. And then immediately file a report with local authorities. And don't forget the ongoing support. But here's the thing that we'll probably most often run into is when a minor discloses past or current abuse to you. So keep these things in mind. First off, never promise that you'll keep this a secret, because that is a promise you cannot and should not keep. But in fact, if you feel a student is on their way to telling you something, you probably should disclose, because I care for you, I might need to report this. But listen openly, stay calm, and be as appropriate as you can to be able to make sure the student feels like the warm and loving environment in order to make the or report to you what's happening to them and reassure them, and then assure them especially that you will offer continued care and support. And I don't, the language isn't quite here, but assure them that this is not their fault, that they're not broken, and that you're alongside to help them for who they are and where they're at. So we have a little section here on how to report abuse because we felt it was important to do so just for your own sake. We have a policy that we'll go through in a moment for how we'll address abuse that's reported at camp. But for you at home, here are the numbers, and the information that you need is in the document there so that you'd be able to know how to address this outside of the retreats. So within the context of our retreat, we will expect that if someone is disclosed abuse, that if you're a volunteer, you immediately go and talk to your leader, the person that led your group, to come, and then that person and maybe they'll work it out together, will come to us as the program leaders of the retreat, and we will help together to make the report using the information that's here in this document. And then we'll do our best to help you as leaders walk through that situation and give you the support you need as you get ready to head home. And again, just to reiterate, if you are unsure as to whether or not something should be reported, that you should report it. In the context of the retreat, come and talk to us. We'll help you be able to determine that. Also on your own, or if you need to, even at the retreat, call the number, and the people on the hotline will help you determine if it's a reportable, something that needs to be reported. So this is something that we feel like this whole process of safety, we would hope that all of our churches have a robust policy in place and are doing this training regularly. What we found out is for various reasons, they don't all have that. And so it's vitally important that we all come to these retreats with these safety concerns, especially around sexual abuse, in mind, so that we don't accidentally ignore a potential problem, nor promote an environment where people could take advantage of the situations that we are in with our students. So thanks for taking the moment to pay attention and to be really aware of the whole issue around sexual abuse. We're going to shift now into our third part and talk about cultivating racial and cultural respect. I'll pass it on to Jonathan to kick it off.
Thanks, Eric. So we want to dive into this part of the conversation. And our aim for this, really, for these camps and retreats, is to avoid any racist incidents, as well as prepare all of us as leaders to be able to respond with grace if a racist incident occurs. And the first thing that we want to address when it comes to cultivating this respect is just understanding racism. And we see that this initially, like, this is God's heart for justice. This is an important part of who God is. We see this in the teachings of Jesus. We see this clearly communicated in Micah 6:8, that God has a heart for justice. And a lot of times Christians just don't really understand everything within racism. And so we're not going to be able to unpack everything during this time. But we do want to at least start off by sharing just some key terms and defining some stuff so that we can be in a posture to be able to be gracious, and also right now in a posture to be able to learn and receive. So a couple of terms that we'll define. If you're following along in your packet, it's in there as well. But I'll quickly go through these. We want to define race. Race is a social construct. It's not a biological reality used to categorize people. Ethnicity is a shared cultural heritage, often including language, religion, or traditions. And then prejudice is a preconceived opinion, or it's an attitude about a group of people. Oftentimes, they're really negative. And then discrimination is action based on those prejudices that negatively affect another person. Racism is a system of advantage-based race. And so it's whenever there is a power dynamic as well. And then individual racism is a prejudgment, bias, or discrimination by an individual based on race. And so we just want to have these terms as a part of our communication. So you can always look back on these as instances arise. But really what's important is that this has such a huge impact on students. Students who have come to Christian camps or retreats before and experienced racism puts a very negative effect on their view of the church, on their view of Jesus. And so we want to be really mindful that this has a huge mental, emotional, and spiritual health impacts. It causes stress and anxiety, depression, and trauma. These are really big impacts that they have. It's going to impact a student's self-esteem and their identity formation. It could impact their academic and social consequences. And so it's really important of us validating a young person's experience as they either have or are experiencing racism. And so this is just all a big part of this conversation. And to go a little bit more on preventing racism, I'll pass it off to Tim.
Yeah, so we're all like a part of the human family, right? And so family can be messy. So although it's impossible to address every prejudgment or bias or discriminatory tendency in every student and in every leader, in all of our groups, even in ourselves, there's some practical steps that you can take to help prevent racism from showing up at Thunder and at Mud. So we'd encourage you like ahead of time, so like pre-event, just as you gather your group to head to an event, it's natural to lay out expectations for your group. So along with kind of the normal things like PDA or paying attention, knowing the schedule, include the statement below or one like it to just lay out your expectations from the beginning. And this is something that we will say also once we're at Thunder and Mud, just to kind of like set the tone for the weekend. So respect for every person is a core rule on this trip. All participants are expected to treat each other with dignity. Racist jokes, comments, slurs, and any other discriminatory behavior based on ethnicity, gender, or ability are strictly prohibited and will not be tolerated. Let's work together to make this a positive and welcoming experience for everyone. So like I said, this is something that will be shared with the entire group during the first session, and it will have the greatest impact if it's a message that's repeated, right? And coming from not just from us at the conference, but also you in your groups, from your main group leader, but also something that's upheld by the volunteers and other leaders on the trip as well. And then we just encourage you to consider like ongoing teaching. So continuing to teach on the subject of justice and racism as part of your regular youth ministry routine. That's a great idea. And this topic is regularly cited as one that students are most interested in. The church's lack of willingness to engage with these topics is one of the main reasons that young people have a hard time with church and why some people leave. So we'd encourage you to just go ahead and check out the resources that we've shared in our handout. Or if you know of resources yourself, like if this is something that's important to you, there's a reason why that's on your heart, right? And so as a shepherd of your students, you know, and you care for each of their stories and each of them as people. So we just encourage you to continue to teach them the full gospel, the full breadth of the Word of God that does address these issues quite specifically. So I'm going to pass it on to Christy into how to respond when racism pops up at our events.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, as much as we work to create a safe culture for every student where everybody is welcome, accepted, and celebrated, we know that teens and adults will make poor decisions at times. And so and if you are responding to a racist incident, we want you to kind of uphold both the safety of all students, particularly a student who is being discriminated against, but also upholding an attitude of reconciliation and restoration for the offending person as well. So there's two types of incidents that that might occur. The first one, probably the most common, would be like indirect microaggressions. So these are those everyday slight snubs or insults that might be intentional, but often are not intentional, that communicate to someone that they don't belong, that this space isn't for them. or that there's something different or wrong about who they are. And so when you witness that happening, we want you to practice strategies for interrupting. And my encouragement would be in that interrupting, do it with grace and curiosity, and not like, hey, don't say that, because that's gonna elicit defensiveness. But instead, like, hey, can you tell me, what did you mean by that? Well, here's why you might not want to say that. And make sure in whatever situation that you're assessing the safety of any student who is experiencing or receiving microaggressions, and what the context is, whether there's space and time for a conversation there, whether you need to have follow-up conversations later. And if a student is like, I don't care, and not willing to listen to you, give them a warning and just let them know that that's not something that we're going to permit here. If you, if a direct racist comment or action comes up, that might come up in one of a couple of ways. You might witness something, or a student might report to you something that happened or that they overheard. So an example would be a student might come and tell you they were called a racial slur, or another example would be you might overhear a group of students making fun of someone's accent. So both of these are examples of racism, but in one you're present when it's happening, and the other you are not. So if you are present when it's happening, the first thing to do is to ensure the safety of the person who is being targeted. So you want to interrupt the situation by verbally confronting the offenders and put a stop to what's happening, explain what's going on, and then take steps to follow up with the group leader and the event director of the students who are perpetrating racist incidents. If a student comes to you and shares their experience of experiencing racism, we want to encourage you to listen with compassion and be empathetic, and then try and help ensure that they have a safe space where these incidents aren't going to continue going. If you're able to identify the offending parties, you can then talk with the offending parties and the leader. You can bring in event staff to help you figure that out, but we would want to confront that. But if you can't identify who said something or who did something, we still want to know about that. We still want to address it. So please make sure you report that to the planning team, event staff. Report to Eric Cave when in doubt. He's always in charge of everything. And then we want to let you know that if an incident occurs, the event staff will be following up on it. We will be following up with students who are involved, possibly with parents connected to those students, and group leaders, because we want it to be a process where people experience change and transformation. So I'd suggest if you want to dig deeper into racial righteousness, there's a link down there to a free webinar on Cov Youth. And it's titled, it's done by Dominique and Veronica Gilliard, siblings, not married, and they look at how we can integrate racial righteousness within our Next Gen ministry. So I'd encourage you to view that if you get the chance.
Thank you, Christy, and thank you, everybody. I hope you do have the desire to go deeper, and highly recommend, maybe even if you get the opportunity as a team of volunteers, to go through that webinar, because it is excellent, and you do well worth your time. We're coming to the end, and I want to just wrap up with this statement, because I think it really embodies what this webinar is all about. By serving faithfully together, we will have a great event, giving Jesus the best opportunity to work in our students' lives. Serving there goes back to that heart of a leader that we talked about, where we want to approach this opportunity with humility. Faithfully is really just being ourselves and being genuine and following God's call to take the next step in building relationships with students. And we're doing this together. We're a family as a conference. And it's one of the best things about the Pacific Northwest is we have such close relationships. And we're going to partner together in order to see Jesus have these opportunities to work in our students' lives. And so we're going to have a great time at Thunder and at Mud, and we can't wait to see you there. So we're going to kind of formally end the presentation part of our training.